So that's started now. Thank you and to everyone for joining us today. Hopefully you can all see me. I've got my video going. Just some housekeeping. We'll do a question and answer session after the main presentation, and that's with David Rice today of Snap Analytics. I'll give David a little intro very soon. We'll get some people joining the call a little bit late. I'll just add them. If you have any questions, feel free to ask those questions in the group chat to everybody, but you will get the chance to ask some questions at the end of the presentation. Just to set the scene, for those of you that have not been on any of the roundtables so far, the reason that we're doing this is we're bringing people together really post-COVID. About 2 months ago, Tracy Keeling, who's on the call today, kindly wrote or helped us write a white paper on what businesses should consider in terms of business continuity because of COVID and post-COVID. And these series of roundtables have been born out of that, alongside talking to business leaders, tech leaders about what technologies companies really need to be embracing. And what seems to be quite a pattern is that the more people I speak to, I hear every day about projects that were put on the back burner from a tech point of view, digital transformation projects, cloud strategies, AI data strategies that were kind of planned for but weren't executed. And all of a sudden, because of COVID, these projects have now been brought forward massively. Businesses are having to pivot, they're having to change their strategy, and tech is at the heart of that change. And so what's come out of these events is a series of talks really with subject matter experts like David today, like Simon Ellis last week, like Tim Olson the week before, like Tracy, like Gunnar from Capgemini, talking about tech transformation, digital transformation, however you want to phrase that, but really how tech is now being thrust into businesses and making change. And that's been really, really interesting to hear from those subject matter experts. And of course, one of those bits of tech, something that companies really need to consider is data and having a proper data strategy in your business. So we're going to welcome David very, very shortly. To kick us off, as normal, we have Tracy with us. So Tracy, hello, thank you for joining us.
Hi Sam.
We normally start with Tracy's overview of where we're at with introductions around the government, where we are right now. Hopefully you should all can see my screen. Can you just tell me whether we can all see my screen, please?
Yeah, it's coming through.
Bear with me 1 second. I'm now going to start sharing my screen with you. So we're going to go through some introductions. We're going to recap from last week, talk about latest government announcements. David is going to talk to us about data strategy. Are you Datable? Which we love. And then we'll have some questions and answers. And this is where we really sort of get into a proper roundtable. Feel free to ask David anything. We've got a couple of other people just coming into the call a little bit late, and I'll let them in. So first of all, introductions. Tracy, as some of you may already know, has 25 years experience in business and technical roles. She's an interim C-level exec and board-level advisory consultant. She recently wrote our white paper on business continuity during COVID, and Tracy spent 11 years at HP in a variety of CIO and COO roles. She specializes in disaster recovery and business continuity projects and programs. So thank you for joining us, Tracy.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Sam.
So do you want to just sort of, again, give us a bit of a recap, Tracy, on where we're at right now, please?
Yeah, sure. I mean, if we look at how things are unfurling at the moment, we've come a long way since the initial lockdown announcement by Boris Johnson. We have had some immense challenges to deal with. We've had business impact, we've had people issues, we've had process issues, we've had resource issues. From what Sam has started to do is around the announcements that have truly affected the business and the decisions that the C-level leadership have had to make. So impact to business has been across customers, across employees, across supply chain, and the business leadership has had to look very carefully across people, process, customer, and technology. This is the fundamental set of four that any consultant will look at for you when you start to say, please come in and help me. So for people, we've had resource problems, we've had public transport issues, we've had the inability to get the right people into the office as we would have been very, very used to doing. And that's really impacted. Businesses have truly had to pivot in order to keep themselves going. Process-wise, we've had constraints that we've never seen before, because how do you do something where it's completely out of your control? We've not had the business plans set up for something like the COVID issue that we've got now. Everything else that you would have had in place, you wouldn't have thought that this was going to happen on a global scale. Customer side, customers have been very, very informed as opposed to how they would usually be. So on a customer element, everybody knows we're all in this together. We've all got these issues. Your customers are a little bit more easygoing around differences in delivery times, around problems that we've been having on getting the products out, because everybody is aware of all of the constraints. We're all in this together. And the technology, everybody has a technology roadmap, everybody has a strategy, but some people are going to have to start to look at this and look at how we move things backwards and forwards, how we move innovation and that technology forward to do it. And then, of course, we can standardize. We've seen in the previous call that there've been RPA, there've been lots of different things to take out that human element, where we've seen that that has been an absolutely critical failure in the business. And it's moved forward probably by about 5 years, I would say, against where we'd expect to be in British industry. So business readiness, this is now very much an artificial environment. This is not something that we'd ever planned or thought that we'd need to be in. And the next slide, if Sam moves that one on for me. There we go. So to assess the current picture, when I go in, I look at a very, very quick and dirty, if you like, way of doing this. It's not an 8-week full assessment. It's looking at all these key inputs that you can see here. So we've got the business and the IT strategy document. Somebody will have spent a lot of time thinking through, writing that, getting it signed off. There will be some elements in there that may be planned for 3 years' time, but we need to do them now. Your RAID logs, if we're doing this on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, you will have all of the key elements in there that you would start to look at and think, where is this impact? What do I need to think about? How do I need to move this forward? Some companies will also have health and safety requirements as a license to operate issue. Those have to be a #1 priority, because if you can't meet those under the COVID side, it will shut your business down. And again, the regulatory requirements, if you have to have your health and safety in place, can we still do that? Can we still do it remotely? I know companies who've moved away and they're using HoloLens in order to have the health and safety people still be able to sign that off. Full risk register. Lots of companies do it, lots of companies don't. If you don't, it's a really good idea to start doing one and doing it in a big way, because right now you need to make sure that those risks don't become impacts, and where we've got impacts we can start to mitigate. Big thing as well, innovation agenda. This has previously been seen as a nice to have. It's been, you know, we'd like to have some RPA, we'd like to look at cloud, we'd like to look at AI, big data. This has now become absolutely critical to keeping your business going, because if you're not aware of what's happening within your business and you don't have that information at your fingertips, there's absolutely no way that you can make the right decisions as a leadership team in order to take your business forward. And once you've got that, you can use it in a business continuity plan. It is so easy to take these inputs and to say, we now understand our priorities, we understand what it is that we have to do and what we can wait. That set of priorities is absolutely fundamental, because you're not going to have an unlimited set of resources. Something that lots of businesses don't do, and I did for Rolls-Royce, is your critical hires list. Those are key people within your business that if they are affected now because of childcare, because of illness, because of anything else coming out of the announcements, what do you do if those critical hires are impacted, and can we mitigate the things that they would do to keep your business running? Look at your sales figures. I know lots and lots of businesses who have shifted to the online side of things because absolutely you can mitigate some of that production loss, you can mitigate some of the lack of resource that you might have by opening up another sales channel. Financial cash flows is absolutely critical. Finance is the one killer of businesses. If you cannot maintain your cash flow for whatever reason, that is going to cripple you and potentially you could go under. We've seen it with Debenhams, we've seen it with lots of other companies at the moment that we'd never expect to go under. If you have issues around your cash flow, really important to talk to the bank, see if they will extend your overdraft, do some borrowing. That's absolutely fundamental to go into your plan going forward. And as an example, we've got IT security and the Wi-Fi on there, because if we have our employees working from home, we need to make sure they've got the right devices, they've got the right setup. There's even the health and safety element of making sure that they have an environment that they can work in. Is it suitable for them? Can we bring them into the office on a limited basis? So we need to make sure we understand that as well and pull that into the plan. And then the IT transformation model, lots of projects will have gone on hold. And right now, that's not what you need. You need to start firing those projects back up in order of priority, in order of what needs to be done to keep your business going. So these are all the critical elements that come in. And what I do is I pull these together in a spreadsheet with, this is the issue, this is the impact, this is what we need to do about it. Is this already planned in the business? Have we got it costed? Do we know what it is? And do we have the resource to do it? And taking that forward from that point, we've got a really clear plan that we can start to roll out in order to make sure that our business can still function going forward. Whatever the announcement that Boris comes out with, whatever he tells us we need to do. So next slide, Sam. Okay, so lots and lots of different things to do. We've done the planning and priorities. We need to understand about the operational readiness. What at that point, once you've got your spreadsheet, it's taking it to the board, it's doing that proper presentation so that they understand exactly what it is that you're asking for, why we're going to do it and what the costs are going to be. The change piece is absolutely critical as well. You know, everybody is on board with what is happening and why. You then need to get people to say, look, you know, this is going to be the extra effort, but this is going to help you keep your jobs. It's a very different change piece than you would do normally within a business. And from that point, it's then top down. The executive level team need to make sure that that's cascaded all the way through your business into the people that are running the programs, the people who are going to be affected by the programs, and they stick with it, not just at the outset for the launch, but all the way through to ensure that that's driven and that's then embedded and it works. So next slide, Sam. So we will do some Q&As afterwards. So I think what we're going to do, we're going to have a slightly different change with the way we do things normally. I think we're going to now do our next speaker. So back to you, Sam.
Thanks, Tracy. That was great. Tracy, really appreciate setting the scene there from a business point of view. We talk a lot about obviously change within an organization. Whenever we look at these digital transformation projects, there's always an element of getting people bought into it. I think that's always a big thing that we tend to forget, whether it be AI, RPA, whether it be cloud strategy. It's all about getting your people bought into the strategy. So thank you for that, Tracy. I really appreciate it. I've just got our other slides ready to go, and then I'm going to introduce David. So today's event was always going to be around data strategy. David Rice works for Snap Analytics. David, I'm just going to unmute you so you can, we'll let you talk now and take over. So are you Datable? David Rice has 15 years experience in data analytics. That covers data strategy, data warehouse design, ETL, data modeling, self-service analytics, You've missed off dashboarding there, David, and storytelling, which I think is a massive, massive part of what you do. And David has been, lucky enough to work for some really big names like ING, Barclays Capital, and also Jaguar Land Rover. So, David, I'm going to hand over to you. I'm just going to try and give you control of the mouse. Bear with me 1 second. There you go, David. Right.
Very much, Sam, and good morning, guys. Yeah, thanks for the intro. Yeah, on the dashboarding side, dashboards are getting a bit of a bad name at the moment. And the conversation at the moment is all around actions that BI drives and not necessarily just build a dashboard, because a dashboard won't necessarily solve all your problems. So I think, so we're going to start with strategy, which is what we're going to talk about today. If it's strategically aligned as a dashboard and it drives actions, fantastic. That's when you're winning. Thank you, Tracy. That's really interesting to see. You were talking about assessing the current landscape, and a lot of the things you talked about, cash flow, sales figures, risks, a lot of that stuff comes back to data. So in this climate, in this COVID-19 climate, the companies that have access to information, have access to data, they're the organizations that have the upper hand right now. And where that data is shared, within a secure platform, so people have the information they need. So I think it's absolutely vital that organizations have a data strategy. At the moment, only 1 in 5 businesses do. So I read recently, and we're going to talk a little bit about why you need one, why it's important. And then what does it look like? What does it mean? How do I shape that data strategy? So hopefully, yes, I can click. So yeah, data can really help your business thrive, and that's been proven. So a Forrester study recently stated that insight-driven businesses are growing at an average of more than 30%. And you've only got to look at the biggest organizations on the planet right now, the likes of Amazon, Facebook, Google. These companies have built whole business models around data. They have grown businesses off of the back of collecting and using data intelligently, not obviously just for analytics, but actually for the way that they automate their processes and the services they provide to their clients. You look at things like automation and what Amazon have done with their warehouses to reduce their costs. Thinking outside of the box and using data in new and innovative ways. They've been very, very deliberate with that. So the 4 out of 5 companies that are not thinking, how can I monetize my data, or how can I use it to drive my business objectives, are really missing out, in my view. A quote from Deloitte: customer-centric businesses that focus on digital insight are 60% more profitable. That's absolutely massive. So hopefully that lays the foundation for why we should be interested in data, why we need to start investing in improving our data maturity and our data capability. So the first part of any data strategy doesn't start with data. And it's a mistake I've seen time and time again. It's somebody somewhere decides they need a certain data set, or they need a dashboard, and you ask the question why, and a lot of the time it's just because this guy needs it, carry on, and you guys go and build it. But actually understanding how, if that dashboard does not help you achieve one of your organizational goals or improve your operations, don't do it. Don't invest in it. Invest in the high value stuff. So where we always start with the data strategy is not with data. It's what are you trying to achieve as a business, and where are you trying to go? And here's just one example. And typically you'll have 4 or 5, maybe up to 7 core goals as a business, strategic objectives. And whenever we look at those strategic objectives within the organizations we work with, you can almost always map them down into data. And here's an example of how we might do it. So what are you trying to achieve is the first question, or what are the things that keep you awake at night? So here's an example. We want to increase profitability by 10%. How can you do that is the next question. So how are you going to do it? So again, this isn't about data. This is about thinking, and as a workshop, this can work really well. Actually sitting down with execs and saying, okay, this is what we want to achieve. How do we want to get there? And what do we need to do then in terms of capturing and tracking that data to get there? So if we just walk through one example, increase profitability by 10%, well, we might think or hypothesize that customer retention is a current problem. We might be winning some new business, but retaining our existing customers is problematic. And we need to increase our customer satisfaction. And an example of this, worked with a big automotive manufacturer, and actually they were getting some bad press because the quality of their vehicles was actually, although they're a premium manufacturer, the quality scores they were getting and the number of failures that they were seeing in their vehicles was actually remarkably high when benchmarked against brands like Hyundai and Kia, who are not seen as necessarily premium brands. So one of the things, this is a scenario they look to do, says how can we improve our customer satisfaction? And they heavily use data to start looking at faults per 1,000 vehicles, identifying where those problems were, enabling them to identify faults in vehicles early and identify patterns so they can actually improve the design of the vehicle and reduce the number of problems in those vehicles. But increased customer satisfaction, again, you can map that down into metrics. So what's the net promoter score? It's a great metric, it's a very simple one. What's the customer scoring you out of 10? Would they recommend you? Would they promote you as a business to their peers? Things like social sentiment could also be useful. You might look at things like predictive customer churn. So actually looking at who do we think, based on a set number of variables, are the customers who are likely to leave and move to another brand or another product. And you can apply some intelligence around that. And things like review site scores as well as another example. Data can also obviously be used to reduce your cost, which helps contribute to the bottom line. You can look at rationalizing suppliers, but you can only do that if you know how much you're spending with certain suppliers. And if you've got, you can also use external benchmarks, data outside of your organization to drive things like that. So it's just an example of how we align data to our business strategies. Absolutely critical. If you are working on a data project and you cannot articulate how it contributes towards your business strategy, stop and make sure you map that out, because it's really, really key. So I'm just going to move on. Okay. So we talk about 4 pillars of data strategy. I know Tracy talked about 4 pillars. I think we've replaced customer with data, but hey, there's close overlap between those two, right? So yeah, first of all, we talk about, well, actually, I'm going to start with teams, because actually people is the most important thing, as Mr. Mikkelsen will tell you. It's very hard to deliver a successful strategy without the right people. So look at whether you've got the right skills. So what skills do you need to create a data strategy, to create a data platform, and actually bring that to life? Have you got the right organizational structure, and have you got the right people in the organization that are really bought in and understand the value of data, understand modern technology or the opportunities that technology brings? They don't necessarily have to understand the technology, but they have to be able to see the potential. If not, have you got the people that with the enthusiasm and adaptability to actually convince them and show them that there's massive value in this, and help to articulate what other organizations have done and how other businesses have achieved success through data and intelligent use of data? Teams and people is absolutely critical. And it's reported still that 75% of people are overwhelmed when using data. So you can either find the 25% that aren't, or you can educate the 75% that feel overwhelmed and help them to become more comfortable with data. Because I think particularly following the current situation, sharing and access to data is just going to become even more critical, especially when people are working remotely. I can't turn around and ask the guy next to me if he can send me a copy of this spreadsheet or do some VLOOKUPs or whatever it is. I want to just be able to see the data and have access to that myself. So Teams is crucial. And we talk about connecting data technology and teams. It's one of the taglines. I think if you check out my LinkedIn, the teams and the people part is crucial. Processes, and I think myself and Tracy touched on this earlier, understanding your processes is absolutely crucial in your business. So do take time to map out those processes. What are we doing? What's the current state? How do we currently maybe get access to that data, or how do we currently make that decision, and look at that process flow? Because a lot of the time, and we see lots of opportunities here when we're working on analytics projects where customers say, well, I take this report and I give it to this guy and he puts it into a VLOOKUP, who sends it to this guy who, and even at a very sort of macro level, looking at those processes, what you often find is actually we can reduce that 7 steps into 1 or 2 steps, or we can actually just automate the whole thing altogether, so you don't have to spend 4 hours a week on it. And there was quite a lot of those scenarios in a big consumer goods company we worked with previously that we identified and mapped out, and they actually looked at it and went, this is madness what we're doing, isn't it? And they hadn't seen it because they didn't really, the senior execs, the CFO didn't really know what the finance team were doing in their day-to-day roles, and we started to map that out and deliver massive value and automate some of those processes. So do take time to look at your processes and understand what steps you're doing and how you can improve and automate some of those. Technology, and I know Simon's maybe going to talk about we're going to discuss cloud and the value of cloud technologies. Technology has massively transformed the data space over the last 3 or 4 years. For a long time, probably for the first 10 years of my career, there wasn't a lot of innovation in this space. The cloud has completely transformed our ability to store data, massive volumes, to be able to be agile, so to be able to start small and scale as we go. So you can turn services on and off, you can scale up and down, out and in very, very quickly. It's also enabled us to switch on infrastructure in minutes rather than months. We work with a partner of ours called Snowflake. I think they're worth about 12.4 billion now. They were second in the Forbes Cloud 100 list. And again, technology has come on leaps and bounds in this space, really democratizing data in our view. It enables smaller businesses to do more. You don't have to be a FTSE 100 company invest £1 million in a data platform now to start getting massive value from your data. So we look at that across applications, what applications you're running and what infrastructure do you need. And actually both of those have evolved massively in the cloud. And I have only got 15 minutes. I could talk about it all day, as you could probably see. And then the other pillar we talk about is of course data and information. So data quality and master data. So how we came up with the Datable concept is we were working with a marketing company, a friend of mine, and he said, what problems do your customers have? And we said, well, they don't trust their data, and their data doesn't show up on time. Yeah, so it's not timely. They don't get it when they need it. And he said, all right, so it doesn't show up on time and it's not trusted. Okay, what about, are you datable? Because from if your data, you want someone that's going to show up on time, you want someone you're going to trust. So we're going to kind of run with this. It's a bit of fun, but actually, yeah, that trust and timeliness of data is so important. So we've built a data quality framework, which again I haven't got time to go through today, and master data. So typically, your master data, you only have probably anywhere between 3 and 7 pieces of master data. It's your customers, it's your products, might be your chart of accounts. So there's a core set of data that actually joins everything together in your business. And somebody described this to me recently as the DNA of your organization. If you don't understand your customers, and if you don't understand your products, and which products are selling, you know, the margin on your products. If you don't understand, you know, the kind of customers you've got and what your customers want and how they are interacting with your business, you're at a huge disadvantage versus your competitors. Now, if you've got good master data, so if you've got a good set of product data, a good set of customer data that you know is accurate, your systems are accurate and shared across systems, your systems can start to talk to each other. So you can automate your processes and you can also report accurately, and that's really, really crucial. We talk about data ownership. If nobody owns the data, so it's often perceived as the IT own the data. IT do not own your customer data. Yeah, IT do not own your product data. So ensuring that we're very clear about where the roles and responsibilities lie around who actually owns that data, who's responsible for it. IT may own the systems, but ultimately there's almost this sort of black hole that data ownership goes into, because IT think the business own it, the business think IT own it. Let's be open and transparent and have that conversation around data ownership. Data security, which I know Tracy touched on, is absolutely, or you know, overall IT security. But the security of data, especially with things like GDPR now, is absolutely crucial. As EasyJet showed us recently as well, I think. And also cataloging your data, understanding what data have we got, because and even in big organizations, you talk to people and they don't know what data is available to them. So by actually cataloging and tracking the information you've got, data is a massively valuable asset. You know, would you run a finance department not knowing how much money you've made or how much you've spent? You know, so data is a really valuable asset. So let's catalog it. Let's understand what data we have got and what data maybe we haven't got that could be valuable. So yeah, obviously data is a really crucial part of that, but it doesn't work without the other three pieces coming together seamlessly. So did I skip a slide there, Sam? No, I didn't. Okay, it's all right. I've cut some stuff out to make it 15 minutes, but yeah, let's talk about the top tip. So start with the end in mind. So what are you trying to achieve? And that's your, you know, your business strategy mapping, but also from a technology landscape, from a you know, people landscape. Where are you trying to get to? Where do you want to go as an organization? If you don't know what the end state looks like, it's very hard to create that roadmap. Yeah, identify high-value, low complex tasks. I've worked on a number of projects where I've you know, come into, and you know, 3-year initiatives which don't actually deliver any value for 12 months. It's a bit like lockdown fatigue. People very quickly start to question what you're doing and why you're doing it. You know, you've been sat in a room for a year. What have you delivered? If you look at what's high value and what's low complex, and you start delivering value quickly, you can start to get people on board, and you can start to show people the art of the possible and the value before you try to tackle some of the more complex tasks. And we use a matrix, and it's got complexity and value, and we often use that matrix to shape what our project roadmap looks like, picking up the high value, low complex tasks as the first things that we do. Start small but think big, and again, the cloud really enables that. You know, do a small proof of concept, or tackle a small challenge, but with a view to embedding that in a longer term vision or process. And fail fast, fail quick, and fail cheap. So, you know, don't go and invest that £1 million until you've proved that actually, yes, we can get value from this data, or yes, I have got data that's of a high quality. I've seen that in action where people have failed very expensively, having spent, you know, 2 years on a project, only to get to the end and say, well, the data quality is rubbish, and it's all your fault. Actually, you know, and you know, we take this upon ourselves to look at the data quality and say, you know, one of the foundational pieces of any data warehouse is data quality. Is the quality there in the first instance to start getting value from this? So make sure you lay those foundations and do the work up front to see if you've got a viable product or you're going to deliver something that's of value. And the last tip is do the Are You Datable questionnaire, snapanalytics.co.uk. You can go onto our website, answer 15 questions, and you'll be able to download a nice report at the end of that, which gives you your Datable score. Yeah, hopefully it's just something that it's a bit of fun, and it will hopefully give some people some ideas of how they can improve their data maturity moving forward. Yeah, that's all from me.
Thank you, David. Really appreciate that. There's your shameless plug at the end. We don't mind. We'll let you off. Really appreciate that, your time today, David. And I thought that was really interesting. I want to bring in a couple of people specifically, because I think a lot of the stuff that you talked about and touched on really feeds into some of the other speakers that we've had, like Tim and like Simon, where cloud and RPA really kind of intermingle a little bit with data, where one can't really exist without the other, really. So I guess Tim or Simon, if you're Simon, I think you're there waiting. Yep. With beta. Just give us a sort of a flavour on, from your point of view, when you're you've worked in a very large organisation, you've worked in small organisations as well. From a cloud point of view, how important is it to get this right at the start? So getting the foundations right, so you don't get that tech debt that you talked about last week.
It's really important. I mean, David had a cracking set of points on there. So I always use an analogy. So everything David said is spot on about the strategy and getting the strategy right. And it's quite often people say, "Oh, just move it to the cloud. The cloud enables this." And a health warning for everybody: it doesn't. There is so much you've got to think about. And apologies for the background noise as the kids kick off. Perfect timing. So one of the things I would say is, the analogy I always use is, if you look at your application estate, I might be calling on Tim to step in a second. If you look at and this is kind of real, based on war stories. Very typically, David made a point. People don't know where the data is and what data they've got. Right now, the GDPR project, if everybody's done GDPR, they should do. They should know where the PII data is, and as part of that process, identified and have an inventory repository for the ICO and all these wonderful things. I look at everybody and there's a few nods and a few oh my gods and whatever, but that, in theory, you've got the data there, and that's good. But very typically in an organization, data is held in silos. So and they're kind of legacy apps, and they're vertical. So I always call those kind of applications the oil wells. There's David's right. Do all the strategy, understand what you want, and then typically companies have gone to the oil wells. They've done ETL, they've brought into a data warehouse, and then they've done some analysis. What you should be moving to in terms of that real time, timely, and trust piece is, how do you access those oil wells? How do you create the pipelines? How can you get real-time data? How can you get eventing sort of triggered so that you open up those applications? And I'll talk about this just briefly in a second, but you've then got the pipes. And then effectively your data warehousing, your machine learning, your analytics is your oil refinery, right? And I'm sorry if this is a cheesy analogy, but the whole point is, you've got your oil, you get it to refinery, and then you have all the different people consuming it in different ways. Big part of risk of the cloud, just as a commentary, is security. And David, you touched on this. You can spin something up so quickly in the cloud. Totally agree. Just think about the data. I'm looking at David, that's why I'm pointing over there. And it's great, but just be careful, because even on Microsoft Azure, the PaaS services aren't as secure as they should be. The database doesn't necessarily encrypt things they should be. So you've got to think about the data as you move across, but always drive back to the value. And I agree, experiment. The beauty of the cloud is you can experiment. It's perfect time. And the kids have been quiet all morning, so I'm really sorry about this. You can experiment, but it's not a silver bullet. If you move an application or you cloud enable it, typically you have to modernize it. Typically you have to open it up. there are traditional techniques like ATL, David, that you can use, but if you wanted to really do real-time trusted, you want to maybe think about event-driven type of technologies, which means you're going to have to do some work to the applications. And what I'm certainly seeing, and it kind of relates to David, what David's point is, organizations that are looking at the strategy, they're looking at, and data is, the oil that drives the platform for many of them. And certainly customers I've been at recently, the thing that's going to transform their business, and I mean pivot their business, and it needs to pivot their business given what Tracy was talking about, is data. It's about information and feeding that information in such a way that allows the organization to pivot, and they need that in real time. And I do mean real time now, not pseudo real time. So the things you've got to look at are different. So tips I would do is no, cloud is not a silver bullet. I think, make sure, I totally agree with David. Understand, drive it from strategy, drive it from what you're trying to do with your business, understand where your data is, what quality it is as well. I don't know what you think, David, but, and I saw Tim nodding earlier on, and when you understand where your data is, data quality typically, I'll be honest, is crap in legacy systems. So the trust element there, how do you, and it's not just a case of getting great data and analytics in, is if you don't solve that front end of people still putting crap into your system, moving it to the cloud and still having them put crap in, old adage, crap in, crap out. So you've got to look at this holistically as part of your strategy. And going back to Tracy's point at the beginning, I think people have dawdled. And there's a great article on LinkedIn by one of the directors for retail at Accenture. He did in Retail Week, and companies have dawdled on data and analytics because they thought they'd kind of got it sorted. The data and analytics is such a transformational piece, the data you've got in your organization, and retailers have been stung by that. You think retailers are pretty good, but they've been doing traditional data and analytics, have not been doing some of the new stuff, and they've been really caught out with COVID. Massively caught out. The spin from bricks and mortar to online and having the data to be able to feed it, big challenge for them. So I really resonate with Tracy's point about those programs. You need to be driving data programs early, really early in the process, so that when you do your digital transformations, you understand your data strategy. And if you're moving it to the cloud, you understand it's just not moving things to the cloud, or if it's greenfield in the cloud, you're putting in the right oil wells, you're putting in the right pipeline, and you're putting in the right refinery, so that you can actually deliver those that strategy. And I'm really sorry, that sounded like a soapbox rant.
I completely agree with all that, Simon, particularly the real time. I sent an email only last night to a partner we're working with in the States to say, my view is that in this time next year, we'll be saying that batch loading of data into data warehouses is very 2019, and I think so. So we're looking for to get some real-time demos from SAP logs that actually push the data directly into the data warehouse, so you can actually see in real time what information.
And it's not that difficult. It really isn't that difficult to get some streaming and stuff going. So the eventing platforms, Apache Kafka, and all this stuff. There's stuff, you talked about experimenting and trying things out. It's actually really easy. And if you go, back to the cloud, you can spin up some of these things so quickly and experiment. And, it doesn't take big, but maybe production for big organizations will, but being able to start quickly and being able to do transformation and add value quickly, to your point, David, and Tracy, about some of those projects spinning up and delivering value and investment, things can be done really quick on that, on Azure, to learn and experiment, and on Google Cloud and Amazon and all of them. I'd recommend doing that, but just be careful of the gotchas, particularly in data security, throwing data around. But my recommendation is think of it holistically. You've got to think of data as part of everything that you do as you're doing your digital transformations. And honestly, I think digital transformation should be data-led, and that data-led in the sense that it's delivering the business strategy. Humble opinion.
Tim, I can see you nodding away there, and I'm going to introduce Tim now. For those who have not met Tim, Tim is an RPA consultant, automation consultant expert, and Tim, you spent how long? You've worked for Tops Tiles. You've worked in the development for a number of other smaller,
Vodafone, Talk. Yeah. I mean, most recently, as Sam says, you know, my interest is specifically around automation and RPA. And fundamentally, when you look at RPA, the key thing is to get structured data at the outset, something that you can work with to put into a process and then allow you to automate. So, you know, ultimately, it all comes down to the quality of the data at the outset of the process. So, you know, it's quite fascinating to hear David talking about, you know, the management of data, because that is absolutely key. And just to give a couple of practical examples, actually, we ran a project where we were looking at printer maintenance. So we had hundreds of field engineers going out to printers, putting toner in, and then they'd find the next week that printer would go down. They'd have to come out again and fix the problem. And what we did was we did some quite deep data mining to look at the propensity for the different parts of printers to break at a certain time. So when we saw that toner needed to be replaced, we would be looking at the likelihood of a part of that printer breaking in the next time period, and we would actually fix it at the same point. And as a result of that data mining, we saved millions and millions of pounds within 1 year. So, you know, having that data available to us was fundamental. And when you look at RPA, you know, I'd be the first to admit that RPA in itself is a bit of just a jumped up macro on its own, really. But it's when you add in all the other complementary technologies, such as AI, for example, that you really get the ROI back from it. And of course, AI is nothing without the data. Yeah, it's the ability for the data mining and the machine learning that enables AI to make those predictive decisions that can inform RPA. So it's absolutely key. Yeah.
I think, Tim, it's a really good point. I recently worked with a client that said we're not investing in a data strategy right now because we're doing digital transformation and we're doing AI. And I said, okay, what are the foundations of those two things? And they sort of looked at me blank, and I said, are you not going to use data for that? Yeah, maybe. You know, so I think there is a danger that these sort of terms become so popular that people become so focused on them. And actually, ultimately, doing a data quality project is pretty dull. So it's not exciting. And I think that's one of the things I've seen is people chase the next exciting kind of trend. And actually, data quality problems have always been there. They're just becoming more and more important as people see the value of AI, see the value of automation and RPA, because data is absolutely fundamental to it. So it becomes more important, not less. And the danger is people perceive it the other way. Oh, that's not important anymore. But yeah,
I agree with that. I mean, if you don't know your customer now, when are you ever going to know your customer? And I think, I don't know about you, everyone in the call, but I am much less tolerant of somebody sending me personalized marketing that is just wrong because they don't understand me. You know, because you get bombarded so much, you know, so you look at, you know, again, picking a retail, but you look at mass personalization as a strategy. Mass personalization as a strategy will only work if the data is clean, accurate, concise, actionable, you know, so you can drive next best action, all this kind of stuff. You know, very, very few retail organizations really have it. Actually, I'll tell you one I think it does. I think Next has got it nailed really well in terms of, if you look at their strategy, they've pivoted towards a 3PL, a white label 3PL. I don't know if you've noticed that. So they've spent a lot of time taking their back end systems and making it effectively multi-tenant white label, and they can now run online shops, delivery, return capabilities. If you think about that at the back, that means their data needs to be blooming good, you know. But they've pivoted during COVID. Smart.
Yeah.
This is for example.
There's so many examples of that, isn't there? Sorry, Tim. After Tim, I want to bring in Susie actually, because I think I know where, you know, Susie's background, if you don't mind, Susie. And I think would love to hear from you around your experiences on cloud and how you've had to pivot sort of recently in your business or in the business that you used to work for. I'm just going to unmute you, Susie. There you go.
Still, can you hear me now? Yeah,
we can hear you now, Susie.
Cool.
Go for it.
I think actually, rather than talking about pets at home and what we've done there from a cloud perspective, I think the bit that would be, I've got effectively 3 questions that I'd like to ask you as a panel. So firstly, you've mentioned data quality, and back in the day, I used to work at Shop Direct as well. And one of the fundamental issues we had when we first started on our data strategy was defining what the business meant by data terms. And so we had kind of the old classics of kind of what do we really mean as a sale? How do you record it? And all of those sorts of things. So that's a question from a go ago. I'm assuming that that's still an issue and that that's a valid piece of work that needs to be done up front. Is that true or false?
I can see Simon nodding as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely crucial. So again, like I say, I worked with a large automotive manufacturer. I spoke to 5 different people and they all gave me a different definition of what a part was.
Yeah.
They could not define a part consistently across their organization. I spoke to several different people in the organization and they gave me a different definition of a sales region. So they're reporting, one included Russia in Europe. Oh, well, you know, Russia is part of Europe according to one person and it wasn't according to another. So you can imagine the CEO looking at the reports going, hang on a minute, yep. Europe, we've had huge sales, but then this guy's telling me that it's so it's really, really important that we've got clear, consistent definitions. And I think this is the only way this gets solved is by having senior stakeholders that are bought into having a strategy around data. The chief data officer role, I know we've spoken about this, Sam, is becoming much more popular because unless someone owns the problem, whose definition counts? Unless somebody can say, right, you know, we're going to take ownership of this as a problem, and you know, these are the guys that, you know, it's the engineers that tell us what the part is, and we go with that. And they can have, it's okay to have different definitions for different objects, and there'll always be different, you know, a part might be a seat or it might be a component of a seat, but as long as you clearly define and have kind of names for clear, consistent definitions, which are accepted from the top, because otherwise, like Simon says, if you've got silos of data, another interesting one was the organization, and this is probably the tip of the iceberg. They had 3 enterprise data warehouses. And it's not enterprise if there's 3 of them. So yeah, I think senior buy-in is, and either, you know, it comes from the bottom up, that you explain to the CEO, here are real problems that this is causing. So that's what I always like to take real examples and say, did you know this guy's sales report says that in Europe you sold X number of cars, and this guy's sales report says that, you know, that's half. You've got a problem, and your problem is that you're defining things in different ways. So tangible examples can really help, and getting seniors to understand those examples and where that problem lies is something I've seen it be effective.
Excellent. It's always good to know that the companies you've worked for aren't unique.
Well, you're definitely not unique, Susie.
Yeah. So then, having kind of like moved on with, so Shop Direct had a massive data warehouse, and actually had the richest source of data I'd ever come across, because obviously with running their own credit, they had all of their customer information all the time, and because it was mail order, it was in there. So that was great. What we started to see there, and I then saw exactly the same thing at Pets at Home, was as soon as you started to bring data together, anyone who loved data went mad for it, and just went out to try and grab as many different data sources as they could. And there were all sorts of things spinning up. You know, there was always kind of like, is weather going to be the big thing to crack retail sales? Is it, what is it going to be, when you didn't even have the consolidated dashboard yet sorted? You kind of had this kind of freewheeling going on. Now, as we've had more and more data scientists come in and more data sources of patching in, that problem appears to manifest itself a bit more, and also then lead to, even in a cloud situation, really increasing data costs. And also, I'm going to shudder to say this, but multiple sources of the same data within the data environment. So how do you as experts in this field start to manage that sort of thing? How do you get control of your data hungry workforce, and they're kind of like, oh, this is cheap, I'll just bung this on, but then you kind of got this constant cost coming in, and the replication? How do you get that management going on to make sure that you don't end up with 5 different sources of the truth? Long question, sorry.
Good question. David, do you want to go first? Do you want me to give my opinion?
You go for it, Simon.
Okay. Again, Susie, it's not unique in any shape or form. One of the things that I've done before, and so I've just finished at WBA, which is on a reboots, and they're moving towards a global data landscape, effectively. So WBA is probably 16 different business entities. If you think of the size of Boots and then multiply that 16 times, and think of the data sources. But one of the things we spent quite a bit of time doing is trying to get a holistic information architecture. And that's kind of addressed some of the previous topics around commonality of language, understanding data lineage, what's where, etc. Now, the data science one's a brilliant one. So trying to get a central global data hub, and it's that kind of refinery piece, which is controlling the landscape of what can come in as raw data, what then goes from raw up into a managed layer on that common business language, and then how that data can then be consumed by different patterns, effectively. And one of those patterns would be data science. Okay, where they would potentially offload from the central data hub a data set, augment with their own. So this is where you're talking about control. So what we were very keen on was there was a control and governance piece of what came in at raw. So what we could come in, and because of that information governance layer was, classic example might have been weather. That would come in, and suddenly everybody wants to know about weather, or everybody wants to know about in the US it was FEMA data. So if there was a disaster or riots and stuff, you were doing geospatial, which stores were going to be affected by what, type thing. You would have to have a governance layer around it. It's not always technology. This is, and sorry, I'm looking up here because you're up on the screen, Susie, so I don't think you're rude, but it's not always the technology. Some of this is, what data sets do you allow in? It goes back to that David's original point of understanding, and this was really complex at WBA because there was lots of different stakeholders and different data strategies. But effectively, what's the data strategy? What do we need? Right, weather, there's a data set. Store information, there's a data set. Product information, customer, and what was PII and what could be used for what, and what need to be anonymized. And at WBA, there was also PHI, health data, and what could be anonymized. You could not have you couldn't identify a patient, but you might want to understand who's taken, groups that have taken certain drugs and things like that. But that was effectively, it was a layered curation process. We could bring things in raw, have an information architecture that was consistent in terms of language and utility, and then have predefined consumption patterns that are pre-approved, where people could get access to that data. To your point about controlling the consumption of cloud, again, that came up through, that isn't just a data and analytics challenge. That's an overall cloud challenge. I talked about it last week, because if you don't have controls and governance around the consumption, so what we talked a little bit about last week is having templates on certain sizes and types of machines and services it can consume, but then the request for those and then the ability to execute on them in the life cycle is kind of governed. And if it's handy, I can talk to you about it offline, what we did and how we did it. But there's a combination of things there, because one example I gave last week was, it wasn't data analytics. Well, actually it was because it was a Cosmos DB. Somebody spun it up and spent $500,000 in a month. $500,000 in a month. You can imagine shockwave. How the heck did that happen? Well, that was pre the transformation program, but that's what can happen with the cloud.
Yeah.
People want to consume data, and play with it. So there's no, yeah, David, there's an example for me. What about you, mate?
No, it's a good example. I was recently talking to a big energy firm, and they use, I'm not going to tell you what technology they use, but the guy said we ran a query that just kept running and running and running, and it cost £47,000 eventually. And that's why you need, I guess, experts to deploy the cloud. There's a lot of there are some gotchas for sure. But yeah, I wrote a blog about this, Susie, a similar scenario called "How to Build a Data Swamp," and yeah, it was meant to be ironic. A couple of people responded saying, "This is ridiculous. This is exactly what I tell my customers not to do." Maybe not quite getting the irony, but effectively, you know, I think again it comes down to having a clear strategy. What is your most important data that you want to govern? So is it your products? Is it your customers? And if you say, this is our master data, these are the products and customers that we trust and that we're going to invest in, and people can hook in and pull those into their systems. Once they've put it through a ETL process and done whatever they want with it, it is no longer centrally governed and trusted data. You know, so I think having a central data platform particularly with your core data, and sometimes it's transactional, it might be your sales data. It's not just about master data. It's what is identifying the really high value data to the organization and making sure there's a central trusted source. And it's not an easy challenge, like I say, because there's somebody else building an enterprise data warehouse, pulling in the same stuff. So I drew a picture for a client once, and it was effectively to show that they had, I think, 7 systems, all data warehouses of some sort. And there was a 90% overlap in the data. And so I said to one of the guys, why did you build this in the first place? Because we didn't have these 2 attributes. So we built our own data warehouse. And the picture that I showed the head of data turned around to me and he said, the problem with this picture is it's too complicated. And it was the whole point, was that the complexity these guys had built was insane. And the reasoning behind it was often that we don't trust the data in that system. So we built our own, which does the same thing. Or we didn't have these attributes. Yeah, I know there's 95% what I need, but the 5% I needed. So I built my own data platform. I stood up a whole team. I invested hundreds of thousands of pounds, possibly more, because I was missing these 2 attributes. And I think you've also got to manage the politics in organizations. I think people often, there's almost that land grab, isn't there? And yeah. I've seen this a lot. And I think that's where the personal kind of piece comes in. It's having people that can manage people and say, do you know what? Don't build that system. Let's collaborate. Use your budget, use our budget, and build something even better. Don't go and replicate it and add 2 attributes. Let's build something better. Or why don't we give you guys the data that you're saying is poor, and you feed back into that data quality loop. Tell us where it's poor. Let's then go and correct it. Let's make it trusted. Let's make it accurate. So I think there's a real, the biggest way to solve this problem is to get everyone in a room, get everyone aligned to a common vision and a common perspective of what good looks like. Because otherwise you're going to get these land grabs, these kind of silos just proliferating. And even within companies that say they've got a data strategy, I see these silos popping up because you're not going to deliver that for 2 years. So I'm going to go and build my own. And I think it's a really difficult challenge. But I think by having, the chief data officer role, I think is a really good evolution. And I think, yeah, if there's not a chief data officer, be that person, be that champion that's saying, let's solve this problem together rather than build, 5, 6, 7 different teams to go and solve the same challenges. Let's collaborate. I think that's really important.
Thanks for that, David, and thanks for your question, Susie. And was that helpful? Did that?
Yeah, it's kind of bringing it all to light. I think my subsequent question, if we've got 2 minutes left, was really around RPA, and the fact that what I tend to see out of that is what I have seen is calculated data, or a new generation of a data object within RPA to resolve a specific problem that then itself is not governed and doesn't come into the warehouse. And I just wondered if there'd been, again, is that just a governance feature, or is that something that kind of happens in other places?
I was going to bring Tim in on that, but I think he's muted himself.
Oh, he's just gone, has he? That's fine. I'll pick up with him offline.
Wayne, I think you did have a question just for us before we finish up.
Yeah, if we've just got time. We're currently going through a process of transitioning ERP systems. So there's a lot of legacy data. We currently have 3 online portals, which we're sort of bringing into one. And we're moving on to SAP Business One. So there's a lot of legacy data with one of our own back offices, which was a bespoke one. So I'm just get some guidance on pitfalls in regard, touching on what you were saying then about the transition of the data, making sure it's right, and the pitfalls of what to watch out for, and basically taking over legacy data that isn't relevant.
Yeah, so my view on this is the data model becomes core, and a lot of people don't like talking about data modeling. Again, it's quite a dry subject, but if you've got a model that reflects your business and your business processes rather than your systems, so it actually says, these are our products, these are our sales, these are whatever. Whereas an SAP, as you probably know them, Wayne, it's got lots of interesting, some of the fields are German and so on and so forth. But building that business related model, I don't know if you've come across Lawrence Core. He talks about a methodology called BEAM. So there's a book, I think it's Agile Business Intelligence, but yeah, look up Lawrence Core and BEAM. I can send the name of the book afterwards. But he talks about a way of modeling your business rather than those legacy systems. And then when you do pull that data in, make sure it's flagged to say where it came from, what the source of the information is. So start by identifying what's the critical business, what's the output we're trying to get to, and accept that then we've got data coming in from different sources. I guess then there's the big question as to how people use that data. If you know your historic data is not of a good quality and you're doing last year versus this year, do you know that Business One has got accurate data and the ERP you had before didn't? It's managing that challenge as well, just making sure people, setting expectations and communicating clearly around. Guys, I think there's some pitfalls around this.
I think one of the big pitfalls we've got is like the data quality, as you've just identified. Because we're transitioning the data across, we're making it fit new structures, obviously, because SAP has got completely different structures to other legacy systems, especially ours, which was bespoke. And a lot of the work's being done in isolation in different areas. So products are being done by the product team, customers by customer service, and the cleansing and the sort of reinterpretation of that and bringing it all back together. It's like the overall review of it. It's becoming, how should we say, the review of it's becoming as timely as the sort of like the reinvention of it.
Yeah. And I think, profiling and doing the data quality stuff up front might seem onerous and take a long time. But I think the value that saves further down the line, it's well worth investing that time. But I would make sure that those people cleansing the data, that's maybe not done in silos, because the other thing is your systems. So if you've got, I don't know, Salesforce or Workday or whatever it is, that make sure that definition those guys are creating is going to be used as a common definition in the future, because that will pull everything together. Your master data is your core. It's where it's the language that your systems use to talk to each other. So I was working with a financial controller of a big FTSE 100 company, and he didn't get it. And I said to him, look, would you hire a team with someone that speaks German, someone that speaks French, someone that speaks Japanese, and sit them in a room together and expect them to deliver a project? He said, well, no, it'd be crazy. I said, why? Well, they don't speak the same language. And I said, your data at the moment, you've got 4 different sets of product data. So you can't report on it. It's a different language. Your systems have all got their own version of it. They're not talking to each other, and that's your problem. And they created hundreds of mappings tables and various things because their systems couldn't communicate together. So I think making sure that you acknowledge this isn't now master data. This isn't a one-off activity. We're not just going to rationalize our products today. We're going to have somebody manage it moving forward. It's going to feed the data warehouse. It's going to feed Salesforce. It's going to feed, our procurement system or whatever it is, so that all of those systems are talking the same language. So I think it's broader. My advice, I guess, would be, although it's probably a bigger piece of work, think of this more broadly than we're doing a migration into SAP Business One. Think of it as we are creating a consistent, managed, governed set of master data that is going to enable us to automate our processes, do effective business intelligence moving forward, and also obviously manage that those transactions that are going on in that system. So that's something I'll be mindful of. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, it just gives me something to go back to the business and just say, look, it's things we've touched on. We are aware that working in silos is probably the worst case scenario. It's just obviously the current situation. It's all separated, not even working in the same office, so it's not easy for people to take the same view of, I say, certain data sets.
Yeah, well, if you want to have a catch up offline, Wayne, give me a shout.
Yeah, we'll do. I'll grab you, add you on LinkedIn, and then we'll have a catch up.
Awesome, nice one.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thanks for that, Wayne. Really appreciate it. Have we got any other questions? I'm conscious we've run over by 15 minutes, which usually happens, and it's a sign that the content is good and everyone's really getting into it. And this is really the value of these roundtable events, where people can ask anything they want. So just very quickly, have we got any last questions anybody would like to put to David? No? Okay. Listen, thank you very much indeed, David. Thank you for everyone attending today. Thank you, Gareth. Thank you, Susie, Paul, Simon, Jonathan, Nick, Wayne. Really appreciate it. Tim, we'll have this recorded and available for you to view. We've downloaded them all onto YouTube, so you'll be able to see those. And I'll also share slides and any other follow-up material. So yeah, thank you very much indeed. Really appreciate your time today, everybody. And we'll see you soon on the next event. We've got a couple of other events coming up. We'll have an extension on the cloud strategy stuff. I'm talking at the moment to the CEO of a digital agency in Leeds called Epiphany and J-Wing, and he's going to be talking about mergers and acquisitions. So it's a very different one, but really from a CEO perspective, which is going to be really interesting. But if you've got any topics that you'd like us to cover, then please let us know. And thank you very much indeed for everyone today. Thanks, Sam. Appreciate that. All right, lovely. Have a great rest of the day, everyone. Take care. Cheers.
Thanks, guys.
See you now. Bye-bye.
Bye.